Hello, everyone. Today we are here with our Empowered Musician of the Month, Jeremy D. Cuebas. It's so good to have you. Welcome.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. So, just a little introduction. Jeremy is a conductor. He's also a podcaster and just an overall really awesome arts leader based in Colorado. He's the founder and music director of Denver Rock Orchestra, and he also serves the Fort Collins Symphony as its assistant conductor and also their digital communications director. And it's also really awesome. You have your own podcast called Podium Time, and you get to interview a bunch of conductors, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
So this podcast has over like what, 120 episodes now?
Yeah, I stopped counting at 110. So we're probably at about 120 by now.
Awesome. And it's been running what for 5 years or so.
Yeah, we launched in August of 2017.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you have a really awesome versatile career with lots of cool branches. And I guess I just want to know a little bit about how you got here. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I'm a conductor, I'm a podcaster. Um I really like to branch out beyond what's standard for conductors. I learned pretty early on that if I wanted to have a career in conducting, it was going to have to be probably more than just conducting, at least for quite a while. So I started my podcast in 2017, um, and it was one of those things where I'd wanted to start it for years, and I kept putting it off because my excuse was I couldn't think of a good name for it. So I remember being at a conducting workshop one day and realizing, like, oh, podium time. If we're going to talk to conductors, it should be called podium time. And then all of a sudden it started. We reached out to Joanne Falletta because I had a connection with her, and I had emailed her a couple times, and she came on. And in our very first interview, she waited for me for an hour to get my technology set up because it wasn't working. So she was so patient. Um, and then yeah, we started talking to more and more conductors and building it out. It started getting really popular. It's a very niche audience is conductors talking about conducting, but I got to learn so much interviewing, 100 professional and emerging and community conductors, university conductors, professional conductors like Joanne Falletta. Um, and then our listeners got to hear those conversations and learn all those lessons from those years of experience as well. Um, and I've always been, like I said, very aware that conducting is more than just conducting, and so that's really the mission that we've had is to help people be better conductors, but help people be better arts leaders and just better people overall as musicians. And our current season is about building back audiences, so that's when we're getting to talk to people like Ruth Hart and Aubrey Bergauer and David Taylor and Jerry Lynn Johnson and bring our orchestras into the next chapter after the pandemic. So again, we're talking about a lot more than conducting right now, and that's just really exciting. And so that's really the most interesting thing about my career is I think the podcast, and that I've been pushing to really change the narrative around orchestras, but also around the conductor's role and the conductor's responsibility to the music, to the musicians, to their audiences and their community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I guess I'm wondering how these correlating careers have intersected with your musical career. I mean, I think it's quite obvious that your podcast gives you a lot of information for yourself and others, but maybe is there parts in your marketing career that help with being a leader in your music?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I've been working with the Fort Collins Symphony as their assistant conductor, and then when the pandemic hit, they decided that they were finally going to invest in a new website and a social media manager and really start, taking audience building seriously. Because like most orchestras, we had been, you know, okay, and then the pandemic hit, and then everything everything fell apart. So I really applaud the board for realizing the importance of investing. So since I was working with them and I've been running the podcast, they and I'd been part of the marketing committee. I'd always been a little interested in marketing, but um, basically they hired me to build their new website, which was a huge undertaking. It was so much bigger than I thought it was going to be. And then start running their social media, and I started getting really I started to see the power that like good marketing can have, because we can put on the best concerts we want, but if no one's coming to them and seeing them, um, then it doesn't matter. And so whenever I work with an orchestra, I do a little bit of consulting as well. I do a little bit of marketing consulting, and whenever I work with an orchestra, I emphasize that like what you're doing on the stage is fantastic already. Our music's great, our performances are great because we're really good at those things already. It's all the other stuff around it that orchestras are really bad at and that classical music tends to be really bad at. So I realized that with marketing and with the way that we talk to people about what we do, there's a lot of power in there to get people that would never consider coming to a concert to come to a concert for the first time, and then educating them in why is this so awesome, why do we love this so much, and why are you going to have such a great time when you come. So now I've had about the past 2 years and this job with the Fort Collins Symphony to really focus entirely on marketing and audience building. And so that's been a huge boon to my conducting career, because I've built all these skills of learning how to attract audiences, learning how to talk about the music that we're doing, learning how to work with the press, learning how to connect our concerts to things that are relevant for the community. And I'm really excited to keep. I've only been doing this for 2 years, and we've seen so much. I've got plenty of career ahead of me. So marketing has been a very, very important part of my career, and I'm really excited to keep it going.
Awesome. Do you have any advice for young musicians trying to market themselves? I guess especially people with an entrepreneurial desire or even leadership?
Yeah, I think the biggest question, and I think one of the most fundamental things about marketing that's really, really powerful, is being really clear on what you're trying to do at any time. And this applies to the rest of my life, even when I'm sitting down and studying. Being clear about what I'm doing at that moment is really important. But studying marketing really forces you to identify who you're trying to reach with that marketing and what your actual goal is. So if you are if you're a singer and your goal is to market yourself, well, most people will think, oh, I'm just going to go post stuff on social media. I'm going to do this. I'm going to post this kind of stuff. But what most people don't do is they don't start with the basics, which is, what is your actual goal of that? Like on your website, a lot of us have a musician website. I'm going to turn my phone off real quick because it's ringing right next to my microphone. So the question of what is your website for is like, is this a portfolio of everything you're doing that you can show to somebody? That's great. What is your social media for? Are you keeping a log? Are you showing people all the interesting things you're doing? Are you sharing your thoughts about things? Really getting clear about what that point is. I was working with one marketing client who is a composer, and he had his website just had everything he was doing. It was like a big portfolio. And we really narrowed down, like, what is the website for? The website is a place to keep information about the pieces that you're selling. So we redesigned a lot of stuff to have all the information that somebody visiting it would need. Again, this is thinking of the purpose and being really empathetic about who's visiting the website and why. So we rearranged his website so that here, right on the front page, these are the things that I offer. And here's all the information you could possibly need. Here's a score sample, here's a recording sample, here are testimonials. So we redesigned that website from just kind of a mishmash of everything you're doing, where everything's on the same level, to really prioritize it to, this is the audience that I'm trying to reach, this is the point of this website, and now that's right up front. And a lot of orchestras do that too. They have a website that is, here's all of our stuff. Orchestras' websites are usually designed for like board members and people that already go to the orchestra. But the thing is that they're not really going to the website for any real reason. And Aubrey Bergauer talks about this a lot in her work. So this is directly from her. But for an orchestra website, that website is a place to sell tickets, to teach people about the concerts. So when you're advertising a concert and you try to reach a new person, if you know from the beginning that the website is for those people, you're going to build it very differently. You're going to put all the information right up front. Um, information about our education programs is great, but people seeing that doesn't really change any of their actions. Um, People seeing the concerts we have coming up and why they're awesome and why they should go to them. That's really it. So the biggest thing that I've learned from marketing is that clarity of purpose and then designing things around that. We tend to start with what we want to do and then just hope that that works for what for whatever the outcome is, and then go with the outcome. But we rarely stop. We rarely start with the outcome and then design things around it. And so now, I bring that to programming. I don't start with what music do I want to perform. I start with what experience do we want to have? What do we want to connect this with in the community? What things are coming up historically that we can connect this concert with and make it really significant? If the point of a concert is to change people on the other side of it, or just to entertain people, then starting with that, we program differently. We organize things differently. So it's really all about clarity, 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 and identifying what that is from the beginning.
Awesome, thank you. I'm having two questions that
Yeah.
I'm from what you just said, because it's so much good information. I guess the first one is, it sounds like you're also doing consulting, and I'm wondering, you're correlating careers, including your helping other artists grow. I'm wondering, does your artistic well-being also go with your financial well-being? Because we get told so many stories about starving artists, and I'm wondering how you make sure that you are thriving in both of these areas of your life.
Yeah, and it's tough because our art form does not pay a whole lot by default. So you do have to build these up. I mean, I still have violin students. I have a full-time job. I have one conducting position right now that pays a little bit. Definitely not enough to be the only thing. I wish it did, but that's just one of the facts of our industry that we have to deal with. And then I teach violin, so I have to have income from a lot of different places, because very few things. Well, I mean, the deeper problem is that the arts are not super valued, or that we're not producing something that's valuable. So I think as we continue to make the arts more important in society, and that's why I'm always pushing for relevance, make this something that the normal person will care about, that will that makes it easier for us to make a living doing what we're trained to do and what we do excellent, because normal people see the value of it. So yeah, it's difficult to be in the arts. I've considered going entirely into marketing and dropping the music because it takes such a long time to get the music part of it to be sustainable. And for a lot of people, a lot of musicians never get there. And there's nothing wrong with doing it part time. There's nothing wrong with dropping it and focusing on something else. It all depends on the individual. But unfortunately, yeah, it's hard to make a living as a performer. So yeah, but my day job with the symphony has been incredible. And before that, I was working in the box office of another symphony. And what I've learned in these two positions has changed so much how I approach everything else as a conductor and a music director.
And then my other question is, you talked about programming and having historically aware concerts, and I'm wondering, what do you see the future of orchestral, classical, operatic audiences to be? What do you imagine our art form can look like to expand our audiences, which is it sounds like
Mm-hmm.
the main work that you do right now.
Yeah, and this is going to take a really quick reframing. So the way that I talk about this is that there are classical music insiders and outsiders. And insiders are the people that already come to our concerts. There are subscribers. There are board members. They're the people that are already like into classical music. And then there are outsiders, which is the other 99% of people in the world who don't know anything about our art. And we've spent all of our marketing, all of our everything, all of our energy has always gone to the insiders. And we tell ourselves that we have to make them happy and we can't do interesting things sometimes. But to be financially viable, that insider pool has just gotten too small now. And we're feeling that right now. It's just literally too small. So we need to be reaching people that don't already know about the symphony. And I know you talked to Ruth Hart recently, and she's talking about this. I actually took this idea from her and kept running it and kept applying it to other things. Um, and so when I say relevant concerts, we can play Brahms 2 all that we want, but if most people don't know why that's interesting, they're not going to come to it. So relevant concerts being, for example, the midterm elections just happened last week or 2 weeks ago. I don't Weeks don't mean anything anymore. And 3 days before that, we had a performance in Fort Collins that featured Stacey Garrop's "The Battle for the Ballot," which was written for the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And so we had Stacey come out, and we had a narrator and everything. And that concert also had Firebird and Isle of the Dead on it. So it was really, if you were a classical music person and you went to that concert, you see Firebird, okay, I love Firebird, I'm going to go to that. But if you're not a classical music person, we had something that already has a connection to their life, which is the fact that there's voting happening and there's political issues. And so the normal person has no connection to Firebird. The word Firebird means nothing to them. But the normal person votes and has an opinion about politics. And so that concert suddenly gave them a little germ to connect with. And they see that concert and they say, oh, this does have relevance in my life. And so that's a really strong relevancy example. I say also, if you can't always have something like that, even something like Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet, normal people see that and they have some connection to it. So being relevant in that way, relevant to the normal person, and that's a lot about programming. That's a lot about the music we're performing and then how we market it to different audiences. And again, insiders are already probably coming to the orchestra or know why Brahms 2 is a great piece to go to, but outsiders do not. And so there are a lot of different ways to do that. It's not just political relevancy or putting a piece on that they'll recognize, but it is really being empathetic and considering the fact that most people don't know why they should go to a symphony concert already. And we have to meet them where they are and not where we wish they would be. And then in a couple of years, when we have more insiders, you can do whatever you want. But right now, we're kind of all feeling the slow crisis. So that's my biggest work with relevancy is just consider the people that are not coming in. And again, that takes a lot of active empathy because everybody working in the arts is an insider. Our executive director the other day, I was trying to explain this to somebody, and our executive director said, "Well, I'm an outsider." And I said, "Do you know who Shostakovich is?" And she said, "Yeah, of course I know who Shostakovich is." And I said, "Then you're an insider. If you walk up to somebody on the street and say, 'Who is Dmitri Shostakovich?' they have no clue." And so, again, it takes that radical empathy to understand where people are coming from, and that Shostakovich 5 only means something to 1% of the population. And that's a marketing and a programming, and it has a little bit to do with everything. But yeah,
Awesome.
those are my thoughts on relevance.
Yeah, really, really great perspective. Shifting kind of our conversation to
Hmm.
more of like personal well-being, and I'm
Yep.
wondering, what does your work-life balance look like, and how do you avoid burnout and all that type of fun stuff?
Yeah, burnout has been a really fun challenge for me for the past however many years. Um, what I've been experimenting with really recently is identifying what needs more and what needs less effort. Um, there's time management, there's prioritization, and all this stuff. But I know I've had the issue, and I'm sure a lot of other musicians have, is that when we're doing our music, we want to give it 100%. And when we're doing our work, because we give 100% to our music, we tend to give 100% to everything that we do. We are the type of people that tend to give 100% to everything. So I'm very actively right now exploring the things that it's okay to give only 80% to. And one of those things is parts of my podcast. I burned myself out during the pandemic editing the crap out of every single episode, taking a transcript. I wanted to make the editing process perfect. And we had to take a break for a year because I couldn't keep that up with a full-time job. My previous full-time job was in a box office. That was much easier than the marketing job. And so when we came back for this new season, I knew that something had to change, and I started experimenting with where in my life I can only give 80% and still get basically the same results. And I realized that when recording my podcast, the interview is actually what matters. The editing doesn't really matter nearly as much because the brunt of the work has already happened. 90% of the content is already there in the interview. All I have to do is just make sure it's okay. I don't have to make it super special or anything. So I stopped. All I do now is I go through the interview, take notes, and cut out any bits that aren't great. I don't put pre-music on. I don't record all these things. I don't do the transcript. I don't do complicated show notes. And what I found was, really quickly, nobody cared. Like the hours and hours of work I was putting into making the podcast just perfect in the editing room, nobody cared. Not a single person has reached out and said, "Oh, why aren't you doing intro music anymore? Why aren't you doing that sound clip at the beginning?" And that stuff's great. I would love to do that, but I don't have the time to do it right now. But then the other side of that is I realized that the marketing of the podcast being at 80% was not enough. So I realized that people were not listening to it. Part of it's because I was hiding because I didn't think the quality was as good enough, so I wasn't taking that extra effort. But people reached out to me, and somebody said, I used your interview with Aubrey Bergauer. I sent it to the board, and I realized what we're doing is important, and people need to hear it. It's just that I don't have to edit it to 100%. So that experiment revealed to me a place where I can do less, and then the place where I need to do more. And running those experiments in my life to see what can be just okay. Social posts can usually be okay, but a marketing email, you should spend a little bit more time on that. Designing a program, you should spend a little bit more time on that. So really identifying and prioritizing and being active about what gets more and what gets less effort, and letting things be good enough a lot of the time has been really important to me.
I will take that advice to heart. It's really awesome.
And you got to run the experiments. You can't just, you'll pretty quickly see what works and what doesn't. But I think we'd be surprised how many things are good enough at 80%.
For sure. I'm wondering if you have any fun hobbies outside of music and if these interests ever intersect. I've heard through the grapevine that you might like Christian metal rock bands, and I was wondering if that has to
Oh, that's interesting. Where'd
go
you
into
hear
your
that?
rock orchestra thing, and yoga, if that helps with body awareness,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of talking about hobbies.
Yeah, so I really like reading, and I read a lot of non-music books. And that's just a really big hobby. I love business books. I love business podcasts. So, and I think that all leads into the marketing stuff. Um, yeah, I used to be in a Christian metal band in high school. I was in a couple bands. We recorded a couple albums. I played everything but bass in all different bands. And so that was a really fun period of my life. But I've always thought of myself as a conducting outsider because, again, I used to play in metal bands. I love working with the rock orchestra. It's so much fun. It's so much lower pressure because, again, we're so about perfection with classical music. So that's a fantastic group to work with. It also helps that it's not me running everything. We have leadership that's doing the programming and doing the arranging and doing the organization. So I've tried to start a bunch of ensembles in my life, and they all fell apart because I was the only one doing it. So the rock orchestra is really fantastic because I can just show up and conduct. And so yeah, that's a really special hobby of mine. I hate when conductors will, say oh, that's kind of boring, and I'm like, no, that's the stuff I want to do. I can go to a workshop and pay $1,000 to conduct again, I keep saying Brahms, to conduct Brahms with an
What did
orchestra.
Brahms
But
ever do to you?
no, I love Brahms. I actually have this Beethoven bust here because I love Beethoven, but it makes me think of Brahms with Beethoven over his desk. But like we're doing, I have a concert tomorrow night and Sunday night. We're doing two performances in two bars, and we're doing "Smells Like Teen Spirit" and we're doing Britney Spears, and I just love it. Um, so yeah, I mean, music that's not classical is great. Um, I also, my wife and I love horror movies. Um, Horror movies and yoga are two of my other favorite things. Just because I like to take care of my body. Our body is our health, and that's where our energy comes from is is being healthy. And if I've got a lot of stuff on my plate and I've got to go conduct a couple concerts and write marketing copy and take social pictures and organize all those posts and work on the podcast and just spend time with my wife and my dog, my body needs to be healthy. So yoga is really great. Also, I'm a violinist, so I've had a couple of shoulder and back problems. And then yeah, we really love scary movies. I mean, Halloween starts at the beginning of September, and then from now until Christmas, we're watching all the horror, like the Christmas horror movies. So we've got our own special blend there. So those are my outside of music things: my books, my rock music, um, the horror movies, and yoga. Yeah.
Awesome. Kind of to close up this really wonderful interview, I'm wondering what makes you feel successful, what brings you joy, and what makes you feel empowered.
Yeah, the one experience I had recently was giving my first concert in years. And that was, the pandemic was really hard because I could practice my violin all I wanted, but I couldn't get up in front of an orchestra. And so I had forgotten what that was like. Um, so that made me feel really alive. That really rekindled. Um, and just it's what we do is so nebulous. Hearing the impact that it has on people is so important. When we're performing in front of an audience, we can see and feel and hear the impact that we're having on the audience or the orchestra. Um, but when we're just practicing, it's hard to do that. And so making sure that I recognize the work that I'm putting in, and make sure that I help others recognize the work they're putting in, and just remind people that even when there's no feedback coming from the outside, we're still doing a good job. There's that gap for so many musicians between when you get out of school and now you're not getting any feedback, you're not performing, you're not doing whatever, and then it takes a couple of years to build that up, and that's a tough time to get through. I don't know if I would have gotten through it without the podcast. The podcast kind of kept me going. Um, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Maestro. Thank you so much for being our Empowered Musician of the Month. Everyone, go check out Jeremy on our YouTube channel and our Facebook and all those good marketing things that we just talked about in this grand old interview. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you.